Very big welcome to all of our attendees for these Tuesday morning Toolbox Talks. As it's the start of the new year, we have some new outlooks that we want to look at, new things, new legislation, but the same things from 2022 are still affecting us, things like COVID-19. And so we want to encourage you to continually try and prevent not just COVID-19, but other occupational health related risks that you might find, especially within the plumbing industry. So here are some of the tips that we've learned from last year that we can continue to use in our day-to-day life. That would be washing your hands regularly with soap and water for at least 20 seconds. If you do not have running water available, it is a good idea to use an alcohol-based hand sanitizer very regularly as well. Then if you have not washed your hands, please avoid touching your eyes, nose, and mouth. Avoid close contact with people who are sick, as well as your social distancing measures where this is needed. Cover your cough or sneeze with a flexed elbow or a tissue, and then please make sure that you bin that tissue as soon as possible. Now, this is something also that is very important, cleaning and disinfecting frequently touched objects and surfaces. And when we talk about objects, we're not just talking about the day-to-day things that we are touching, door handles. We are also going as far as asking you to please include in your toolbox talk the need for good housekeeping practices, good safety measures when it comes to the tools and any equipment that we might be using from person to person. You see, these frequently touched objects, tools, and equipment that passes on from one person to the next person may be cross-contaminated as well. And because we are working in the plumbing industry, you are going to be exposed to biological hazards as well. And so the tools that we are using or the equipment that we are using in there needs to be clean and disinfected as well. Then if you can, please do your part and get vaccinated. Remember, all companies should have a policy on what their vaccination procedures are. Please find out what these guidelines are. And if you do not have one as a company, please implement one, even if it is just to say what your stand is on the current vaccination. Now, when we take a look at 2023, there's a lot of things that we want to look at for the new year. And as we start in the new year, there's a lot of things you might want to do, might want to accomplish that you didn't maybe accomplish last year. Perhaps you're still looking at it and saying, new year, same problems. And that is why we decided to speak about one thing that is on everybody's mind. And that is the load shedding problem. Is there a health and safety risk when it comes to load shedding? What about the use of generators when we are working as well? Well, our safety thought for this week, in line with load shedding and all the issues that it brings with us, is that you must not be in the dark about safety. Even though load shedding is currently happening and getting worse, it seems, there are still things that we need to do in order to ensure that we remain safe on site. Now, what we want to encourage you to do is take a look at what we have coming up for the rest of the month. We're going to be looking at, as a plumber, your knees and your back. Are you protecting yourself from the dangers of future problems that you might have or future injuries that you might have by looking after your valuable assets, that being your body that helps you to get to work and be able to get into places that perhaps as we get older, we are less likely to be able to achieve. Then we'll also look at the end of the month at maternity within the plumbing industry. And we have had a whole maternity risk assessment done for you. We've done a maternity profile, a little bit of a policy, as well as a little bit of a training. Not much in the way of telling you exactly what you must do, but just some good guidelines, looking at the basic conditions of Employment Act, as well as the regulations around what needs to be done for those who are finding themselves pregnant while in plumbing. So if you have this currently within your company, you might not have a pregnancy or a maternity policy, well, this will definitely assist you in getting those employees who need the maternity leave the desired result, helping them to achieve a safer lifestyle, not just for themselves, but also for their family and their future children. But do you want to hear something specific? Do you want a specific topic to be discussed throughout the year? We encourage you to please speak to us. Remember, all of these Toolbox Talks are proudly brought to you by the Institute of Plumbing South Africa. And at any time, you can get in touch with us at safety@iopsa.org. You can also get in touch with the presenter, myself, Chris, at info@ohss.co.za, or even on my WhatsApp number, 071 875 2070. Then remember, if you are accredited with SIOSH or PRB, you can also get a CPD point from SIOSH and 0.25 CPD points from PRB. Well, let's get straight into load shedding and generators. That's really what we want to discuss this morning, especially for this week. In fact, probably coming up from the next few months, years, load shedding is going to be with us. And as frustrating as it must be for everyone to work around the load shedding schedules and the power outages, the need to stay vigilant with regard to the dangers that they cause are real. We need to ensure that we are also prepared for and plan for load shedding and the use of generators. So let us look at just a few dangers that load shedding will cause while we are working on site, things that you already know. So these are going to be good reminders for us. But what it's going to help us to then do is take a look at what the positive sides we can bring to our safety management system from a negative thing like load shedding or the high cost of running a generator on site. So when power failures happen, it's, as we mentioned, it is completely frustrating. We do agree. And when the power goes out, you are unable to continue working for some of the following reasons. There might be a lot more, but we're just going to discuss a few of the following reasons. The one reason that you might not be able to work is that you have to have light in the area of work. Perhaps you're doing an installation, you might be inside a ceiling, perhaps you're inside a building with not much natural light. So you need as much other lighting from electricity points, from globes that might be installed already into the building, or perhaps your own lead lights that you have brought in. So any natural light that is in the building is just pretty much not there for you to be able to utilize. So you have to bring in your own power. Perhaps you're using a power tool, something that runs on electricity. And when the power failure goes off, well, the tool is no longer going to be able to function. Then the installation that you are pretty much working with at the moment needs the electricity to run the actual installation. For instance, perhaps you are going to be testing a geyser to see if anything is wrong. You actually need the electricity for the geyser to be operative, if that's an electric geyser and not a gas or a solar geyser. But all of this needs electricity. And so when you find yourself in a power failure, you might think to yourself, well, I'm unable to work. Well, the first thing we want to encourage you to do is to plan ahead. So we have schedules, we have apps. It can tell us when load shedding is happening. It's not 100% accurate. I find that with the load shedding schedule that I have, it's a few minutes out. So not hours, just a few minutes out. You think it's coming back on at 9 in the morning, but it comes back at 10 past 9. Sometimes you think it's going off at 9 and then it goes off at 9:30. So it's really not very, very bad in terms of I can't figure out the schedule between the day. I can relatively put in mind in my diary that it's going to be happening within the next few minutes to half an hour. That being said, it's helping me every single day. As soon as I wake up in the morning, it's almost like a routine. The app that I have allows me to actually save the load shedding schedule, depending on which stage we're having, to my calendar. And then I'll get a notification that in half an hour's time, load shedding is going off. And that's a good reminder because I'm not going to constantly keep checking when the load shedding schedule is coming on. And so that app reminder, or the calendar reminder rather, is helping me then to see while I'm working within half an hour, and you can set it to give you a little bit more time. You can set it to give you a reminder an hour before that schedule tells you you're going to have load shedding. But it's a good way to plan ahead. So I've planned ahead to know if I'm doing a toolbox talk, for instance. Last night, I realized that where I live, I would have load shedding up until 9:30 this morning from 7 in the morning, which is right when our toolbox talk starts. So I won't be able to do a toolbox talk from 7 till 7:30 in the morning because my load shedding schedule told me that I was going to be off from 7 till 7:30 in any case. So no Wi-Fi, no power, no toolbox talk. So planning ahead, well, booked into an Airbnb last night, making sure that they had power as well as Wi-Fi in the morning. And now we are able to bring you a toolbox talk. So planning ahead means also perhaps getting out of our comfort zone sometimes. Maybe it might cost us a little bit, but the desired result was getting a toolbox talk to our members out there. And so really it's something that we want to tell you to do. It might not be a cost to you planning ahead. It might be a big cost. It really depends on the type of work and the type of task you're going to have to perform. But have a backup in place as well. So many have battery backups. Perhaps if you need light to work in that area, you're going to bring a torch with you. But make sure that the torch is able to allow you to continue working. Now, if you are not able to continue working, perhaps you just need a backup torch in order to get out of the area where you're in. So the power goes out, you're in darkness. You can use your phone torch in order to get out of that area, back out into the daylight, and then wait for the power to come back on. But that means you're still not able to work. So if you are working in an area where you know there's a possibility for load shedding, and this means you're going to have to do a little bit of research on where you're going to be working at any given time within the Gauteng area or within the South African area, depending on where you are located. And you're going to have to figure out where that schedule or what time it's going to go off. But have a backup in place. Now, we do also understand these backups do cost, and at sometimes there's no possibility for a backup. Now, if you're using a power tool, again, we need to plan ahead. Perhaps you're going to be drilling, and we need to have a pretty strong drill, a concrete drill that you cannot run on battery power unless you buy a very expensive one. Well, is there a possibility for you to do that? If it's not a possibility, what we would suggest is do the work with the power tools when you have power and schedule it like that. So that when you're using anchor points or when you are putting in the piping onto the wall, when you're not using power tools, you can schedule that work that doesn't need electricity during the load shedding times. It just means you have to have proper planning. Perhaps you might say, well, I'm going to invest in a generator. Well, that also brings with it its own problems, as we'll see in the next few minutes. But if you are able to do that, having a generator is a good backup. Now, if the installation needs electricity, again, plan ahead, do the work when you know that the schedule says there won't be load shedding, and then do other work that doesn't need electricity during the load shedding periods. Again, we're going to say this, you need to plan ahead. Proper planning with these schedules is very important. This is also going to keep you safe, not just productive, but also safe. Why do we say that? Well, again, when the power goes out and you're in the middle of working, you're going to encounter, you need light to work in that area. What is the danger if the power goes out and you don't have a backup like a torch or some sort of battery backup? Or you could bump into things, you could get struck by objects or any hazards around you because you're in the dark. You're not able to see the risks and hazards around you. You might not be able to escape in an emergency. Perhaps if the power does go out and something happens in that area that you need to evacuate as soon as possible, without proper lighting, you are not able to then egress that area and exit the building in a safe manner. So these are the dangers that we need to plan ahead for as well. Remember, not just load shedding happens. Power outages also happen. We could have a short in a building that we're working on because of the power tool that we are using. So it's not only load shedding. These are things and reminders that we should have in place, even though load shedding is one of the most common things that are currently occurring. As we mentioned, you're using a power tool. The power goes out. What are the dangers? Well, the tool will switch off, obviously, because there's no more power. But has the tool actually switched off? Or when the power returns, will that tool automatically start again? Now, most tools have what we call a dead man switch, and you have to have a dead man switch specifically on power tools. What a dead man switch is once you've pressed that switch and you let it go, the hand slacks off and you no longer have power in your hand to hold that switch like a person who is dead. That's why it's called a dead man switch. They let go of the switch. It doesn't continue to run. But with poor maintenance on our power tools, a lot of times these switches are overridden. There are even power tools that come with an override switch where you can press in the switch and then have a clip that keeps that switch in place. And that means that you don't have to grip onto the switch all the time. Be careful and make sure that as soon as load shedding hits and you were using a power tool, disconnect it from the main power. Don't trust that the switch is actually off. You see, you don't want to come back after a grinder has stopped and leave it there. Normally what you do is you put it on the floor next to your feet and you stand and wait for load shedding to stop. Power comes back on. That grinder may automatically start again. And with the amount of force and the amount of, how can we say, power that grinder might have, it might be spinning around uncontrollably and cause a lot of damage and potentially even injury to yourself or somebody around you. Maybe you're grinding into a wall, or perhaps you're doing piping into a concrete wall, and you need to cut out some of that wall. You need to grind it out and ensure that you can fit the piping into this concrete wall. Now, while you're grinding, the power goes off and your grinders get stuck in the concrete. Well, this could cause damage. It could cause other injuries to yourself if this thing starts up again. So just be careful when the power goes out. Remember, we want to do as much as we can during that specific time to keep the area safe. Yes, it is frustrating. You're going to feel frustrated. You want to finish your work, but don't be in the dark about safety. You can take a few minutes right afterwards just to check that the area around you is safe. Then when the power comes back on, power tools may also surge. These might be a possibility. And if we don't have surge protectors, there could be a possibility that the tools that we are using might surge. They could break. They could damage the electrical cabling around us. So it's a very good idea. Again, plan ahead. Make sure that you are looking at the tools before and after load shedding, because anything could have happened. Now, we know we've got weekly checklists, monthly checklists for things, but with load shedding, because it becomes such a high danger, the risk increases. And when risk increases, the need for more regular inspections becomes necessary. So just because we have a monthly checklist and that's the legal requirement, remember, just because it's the minimum legal requirement doesn't stop you from doing more. You could do a weekly inspection instead of a monthly one. You could do a daily inspection instead of a monthly one. You could do one before and after each load shedding stage. It is 100% up to you. How safe do you want to be? If it had to do with myself, as safe as possible, whatever was in my power to make it that way. Then planning ahead, that could be dangerous, as well as using a generator could be dangerous, especially if you need the electricity to work. So this means that when you plan ahead, you might have to invest a lot of money. Now that's a risk, that's a cost. Some of us take out loans to buy a generator just in order to be able to do work. And so we give up the profits of 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 jobs in order to buy this generator for future jobs. That could also be a risk to our company. It could be a risk to our employees, because a company that doesn't function from a financial point of view closes down. And we've seen this. We've heard it over the past few years, even with the COVID pandemic, many companies closing down and causing high unemployment rates. But then the use of the generator. So now you do have one. We think, great, we've got a backup. We've solved the load shedding problem. We have a generator. This means that your safety aspects must include additional measures for the mitigation of risk. Because remember, if you are using, for instance, a petrol generator on site, you must know how to handle, use, and transport that fuel. Because it is a flammable substance, there is a potential for fire and explosions. Because of that hazardous substance being a petrol, you could be exposed to inhalation or even skin contact, and this could cause injuries as well as severe health issues later on. When a generator starts up, there's going to be more noise than was in the area before. It's going to potentially have fumes that constantly pump into the atmosphere around us. And now you need to plug into that generator, and perhaps it's not close to where you're working. And so you need to have cable management, because the leads from your Jenny to your work area may be quite long. So when we have a backup plan, remember there are going to be additional safety management requirements for those backups, because your scope of work has now changed. It's including the additional items, such as including a new generator. but it's going to mean that you have to have certain additional compliance items in place before you're allowed to continue working. And the safety officer on site is going to ask you for this. So if you know that load shedding is a possibility, and I think every South African now knows load shedding is a possibility, you know that you need to plan ahead for these consequences. The best time to start planning ahead is right now. So take the time to see what you need in order to ensure that everything is in place before you work on that project or before you even start with the task. Ask yourself a few things. Do you have to have electricity where you are working? Can you perform that work during times where there is electricity, working on the schedules that we see with load shedding? And then is there a possibility on working on the rest of the stuff, perhaps other types of pipe work that does not need electricity during the load shedding times? What will you need the electricity for? Is it for the actual installation? Is it for tools? Is it for lighting? Do you have a backup? Is there even a backup available for the need that you have? Have you done enough research? Does the backup require additional safety management? As we mentioned, petrol generators means that you're now having hazardous substances that you need to keep, transport, and handle. And then what do you need now to comply then? Remember, if you've got battery backups, if you've got generators, if you've got backups in place, there may be a possibility that you need additional information to comply with that. So what do you need to do then? Your additional safety management, the compliance that you need. If we're looking at the use, transportation of fuels or petrol, you need to have good training for your staff. You need to have procedures in place for each of those. How do you handle the petrol? How do you use the petrol? How do you transport that petrol? Then are there any permits that are required? Remember, it is a flammable substance. It is a hazardous chemical substance. So you might need a permit from your client in order to use petrol on their site. Perhaps because it's a flammable substance, you might not have had fire extinguishers on site because you weren't doing hot works. Now, because you have this flammable substance on site, you need to have proper fire prevention in place. Because it is a hazardous substance for skin contact or inhalation, you need to have your first aid measures, your first aid procedures in place. You have to have the MSDSs to say what you need to do in case of spillage of that hazardous chemical substance. You need to have hearing protection because of the additional noise. You need to have ventilation or proper breathing protection or additional PPE because of the fumes, especially if you're in closed areas. Then you need to prevent slip and tripping hazards because of your cable management, which means we have to relook at our risk assessment. We need to compile new procedures or safe working procedures, as well as operation procedures from the manufacturer to use those generators correctly. This means that your additional safety management and compliance needs to be prepared for. Again, don't be in the dark about safety. Load shedding is going to be a frustration to all of South Africans, but you can manage the effects. Be prepared, have a schedule available, have a procedure of what to do when the power goes out, and then do your inspections before and after load shedding. The time to plan is now. It's the beginning of the new year, and it may have already had its stresses to start with. But we're hoping you take safety seriously and implement an effective system for safety management. That way, it's one less thing to worry about. Together, we can have a great safety system. With Prime, the new plumbing for risk, incident management, and emergency care for plumbers, we want you to take the time out this year. We're going to be sending out those mails for you in the next week to invite you back to Prime from last year. We know we had its hiccups, and we thank you so much as all our members for being so patient with us in developing this program. But really, the benefits of this program, as well as the safety management system that we've designed for you, is something really important for all plumbers to have within their business. Now, if you have any information, if you have any requests, please keep in touch with us. You want to reach out to us, safety@ohss.co.za. You can reach out to us, safety@iopsa.org. Then urgent request from us, please, from OHSS Consulting. We really want you to complete an incident report for statistical analysis. Now, we're working together with FEM as well as Master Builders Association. And we're going to be looking at different areas that are affecting our plumbers in the industry, different incidents and accidents that are actually happening. But we need to know from you what is actually happening. Please remember that that link that we've sent out on mail, if you don't have that link, please get in touch with us. safety@opsa.org, safety@ohss.co.za, or info@ohss.co.za. We will send you that link. It's an anonymous link. You don't put your name down or anything like that. We just want to know what is happening in the plumbing industry. Have you been hurt? Have you been tripped up? Have you slipped? Has anything happened that could have caused injury or harm or danger or even damage to the tools and equipment we're using? We want to know this. We want to hear from all of our plumbers, because if it happens to one, there's a possibility it happens to another, and there's a possibility it happens to another. We can then curb these types of near misses, small incidents, accidents, and potentially dangerous emergencies from happening to you. But we need your assistance. Now, next week, we're going to be looking at knees and back. What are you doing to protect those, as well as maternity, and what you can do to have a proper maternity procedure and policy for your company, specifically looking at maternity within the plumbing industry. So again, the safety thought for this week: don't be in the dark about safety. Plan ahead and make sure that you have everything necessary for additional safety management.